On Facebook Live. This is Jabari Long with episode number 8 of the Long Report. Today we're going to talk about the difference between land contracts, lease options, and rent-to-own agreements. Oftentimes people get into these agreements because either they cannot qualify for a mortgage or they do not want to go through the qualification process in property acquisition. However, although they all are similar, they can have some distinct differences. The biggest difference between these three agreements is that the land contract actually gives the land contract buyer ownership as soon as the agreement is signed. They have title to the property, but they don't have the deed to the property. In a lease option and a rent-to-own, those buyers, or we like to call them tenant buyers, only have equitable interest in the property. They do not have ownership in it as of yet. So I have had a lot of clients in the past who have came to me and said, well, Jabari, I thought I was buying this property. The owner said that we had a land contract agreement, or I was renting to own it. And then it turns out that I didn't have the opportunity to buy it. And I always say, well, where's the agreement? Let me review it. What does the document say? So I find that a lot of times people get into these situations based off verbal agreements. And in real estate, nothing that is done verbally stands up in court. Everything must be in black and white. Even the changes. Oftentimes, arrangements change, payment dates change, even payment amounts change in real estate. This happens often. However, both parties, all interested parties, need to agree into writing to anything that changes. So, I guess we're talking about land contracts, lease options, and rent-to-own contracts, but the moral to the story is make sure everything is in writing. Make sure that you understand the dynamics of the contract that you're signing before you sign it. I think that's the biggest thing where people get in trouble. I've had a lot of instances where people have felt like they've been taken advantage of or duped in a contract, but when it all boils down to it, they did not read the contract before they signed it, or they signed it not totally understanding what they were agreeing to. Okay. So as I said before, these are all useful tools. And depending on the situation and what the seller and the buyer are willing to do, that's when you decide whether you want to get into a rent-to-own, lease option, or a land contract. The agreements are important. How much of the monthly payment goes toward the principal balance, whether that monthly payment, whether there's an interest rate associated with the agreement, if you have an option to purchase it, you don't own it until you exercise that option. What are the terms of the option? Do you have to exercise it within 36 months? If you don't exercise it within those 36 months, what happens if you try to exercise that option after the 40th month? So those are things that you want to know before you enter into these agreements, and just make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. Rent to own, I see a lot of properties, especially in the inner city, via rent to own, and those properties typically need tons of work. I typically don't suggest a rent-to-own situation for anybody. I like lease options and land contracts. Sometimes people market with the rent-to-own tagline on their marketing materials, and then when you actually contact those people and get deep into the agreements, more than likely they're doing some sort of land contract or lease option. You want to make sure or have an understanding of who's paying the taxes and the insurance monthly on that property. whether the owner is paying for it out of his pocket, his or her pocket, or whether you're paying for it in addition to the monthly payment that you're paying to that property owner. Repairs. Who's responsible for the repairs on the property while you're under these agreements? These things should all be spelled out in the document. So there's not a standard document to express these terms and conditions. I've seen land contracts as short as 2 pages and as long as 20 pages. Is the land contract or lease option going to be recorded at the Register of Deeds? These are all things that you definitely want to ask before you sign on the dotted line, so that you have the right expectations for the transaction. I'm not saying that they should be recorded or it's a red flag if it's not recorded, because I think there's a place for everything depending on the deal and what both the buyer and seller are trying to accomplish long term. However, just make sure that you really read the documents, and if you are presented with the documents and you don't understand, make sure that you seek that advice from someone who's knowledgeable on real estate documents and terms. I don't think you necessarily need an attorney to interpret things. However, you definitely need someone who knows exactly what the words and documents mean. So that's the long report for today. Keep in mind that there's a very distinct difference between a land contract, a lease option, a rent-to-own. In your real estate endeavors, make sure that you know what you're signing and you understand the dynamics of those documents. Thank you, and enjoy your day.